Hi everyone, and now for your marine forecast, issued Wednesday, December 18th. Starting out with our sea ice edge, there's been a lot of easterly flow lately. The winds are blowing offshore, and that's allowing some new ice to form along the coast. And also, any broken up ice has been pushed out to the ice edge. So things are really closing up in the Chukchi Sea right now. Of course, the Beaufort Sea is all frozen over. And then as you go further south for Norton Sound and on down all the way to past Nunivak Island, you're starting to see some really significant ice forming up. So it's progressing and growing right now, and the temperatures are cold enough that that will continue. So for tonight's weather, we've got a couple of lows. First of all, there's a 963 millibar low in the Bering Sea, full occluded front around it. Lots of easterly flow on the north and east side of that system. And there is precipitation around that front. And then also over in the Gulf, we have a 971 millibar low that's eventually going to go into the Bering Sea and weaken quite a bit. For Thursday, that 971 is now weakened to 972, but notice all the precipitation along the coast, and also there's some pretty significant pressure gradients in southeast Alaska, as well as coming up to the eastern Kenai Peninsula and Prince William Sound. And then the low over in the Bering Sea on Thursday will weaken to 972. Then for Friday, we've got a whole new system coming up into the Gulf. So 953, that's a significant low pressure system, easily storm force on some of those winds. Plenty of precipitation along the outer coast. Note that it's even some freezing precipitation for Baranof Island down in the southeast. And lots of precipitation all the way over to Alaska Peninsula, Kodiak Island, etc. A secondary low pressure system has formed around Unimak Island or so, 977, and then that last low that was in the Bering Sea has weakened to 983. And hey, folks, there's a whole newcomer behind this. So lots of activity, mainly in the south, relatively weaker systems, and not much going on in the north. So let's start looking at southeast Alaska. First of all, offshore winds, easterly component ranging anywhere from 20 up to gale force 35. On the inside, 15 to 25 knots. Seas up to about 5 or 6 feet or so in Clarence Strait. And on the outside, our seas are ranging all the way up to about 16 feet or so. So pretty good seas out there. Some of that has got to be a southwest swell. Then for Friday, winds ramping up a little bit more on the outside, all the way up to 40 knots off of Cape Suckling, down to 30 knots outflow out of Cape Spencer or so. And then on the inside waters, 20 to 30 knots and seas up to 12 feet in Clarence Strait. Then for the south central waters, we've got gale force off the coast, all the way up to a whole gale, 45 knots, seas up to 20 feet. There's a long fetch across the Gulf with all of those easterlies to really push that water up and build some seas. 45 knots in the Kennedy entrance area and 25 to 40 knots in Cook Inlet. So plenty of outflow wind there. And then looking ahead to Friday, we've got still gales going on the outside waters, 35 to 40 knots, seas up to 23 feet. Now there's probably a young swell in that. In Prince William Sound, we've got 25 knots, seas 5 feet. And then Cook Inlet 20, ranging up to 35 as you get down toward Kennedy Entrance, and seas up to 15 feet down there, and in the ice-free waters, 5 to about 8 feet in Cook Inlet, all offshore wind. Okay, for Alaska Peninsula and Kodiak Island, again, those outside water seas ranging up to about 15 feet or so, but got some gales. Chillicothe Strait, whole gale, 45 knots, seas 13 feet. And then south of Kodiak Island, gale force 35, seas 13 feet. On the Bering Sea side, winds ranging from 20 to 30 knots and seas up to 7 feet. And then for Friday, we now have still some northeasterlies going, 40 knots in Chillicothe Strait, seas up to 13 feet down off of Sand Point, 22 feet off of Kodiak Island, and 40 knots. Wind really backs off in the center of that low down by Falls Pass, seas 7 feet. And then 25 knot small craft advisory in Bristol Bay, and as you go out the Alaska Peninsula, seas up to 9 feet. Okay, for the Aleutian Islands, we've got winds ranging from 20 to down to 10 knots, 10 knots in the center of that low, and seas are on up to about 16 feet out by Shimia, and then they round off to about all the way down to 9 feet as you get down off of Atka. Then for the Pacific side, we've got winds ranging from 15 to 25 knots, plenty of sea out there, seas ranging up to 16 feet. And then for Friday, the winds really back off, again, being in the center of a weakening low. The wind really backs off until you get out to Shimmy about 25 knots or so on the Bering Sea side, 12-foot seas there. Plenty of residual swell in the Bering Sea, so that's still going on. On the Pacific side, winds ranging from 10 to 15 knots, not a whole lot, but pretty good seas out there all the way up to 11 feet. So now for the west coast of Alaska, offshore flow. We've been talking about this easterlies for quite some time. A lot of the wind is over ice now, but seas up to about 4 feet down off of Cape Newenham, 35 knots off of St. Matthew and 35 knots for the Pribilofs, and seas with a fetch distance 17 to 18 feet or so. So then for Friday, now what we've got, again, there's always an easterly component now with all those systems over there. So winds around 20 to 25 knots or so near the coast, and 35 knots for St. Matthew out of the north, and then 20 knots for the Pribilofs, and seas up to about 8 feet there. So now up into the Arctic coast, for the Chukchi Sea and down through the Bering Strait, very light winds off of Wainwright and Point Ley, but ramping up to 15 to 25 knots, 30 knots down by Gambell. And we've got, except over the ice, we've got probably about 9-foot seas off of St. Lawrence down there, 20 knots through Norton Sound, pretty light along the Arctic coast until you get over to Kaktovik, where it's 25 knots. And then for Friday, we've got 10 to 15 knots along the Beaufort and into the Chukchi Sea, but as you get further south and going down through the Bering Strait, wind 25 ramping up to 30 and even 40 knots for St. Lawrence Island. Pretty good northerly fetch going in there, but all over ice. Seas up to 12 feet near St. Lawrence. So that's it for your marine forecast. Be sure and let folks know where you're going to be if you need to go out on the water, and please stay safe out there. Thank you.